Discover the Women in Tech Trailblazers podcast, hosted by Tiffany Benitez and Jordan Franklin. Here, the complexities of being a woman in the tech industry are unraveled through discussions on key issues, personal growth, and how to succeed despite systematic challenges. It's a source of empowerment and inspiration for all women at all stages of their tech careers. We are so excited to have you joining us here today. We have an amazing guest here with us, Dan Rice, and I am super excited. I'm sure you're wondering, where is Jordan? And we had some conversations, and so we've tried to record this a couple of times. And so we talked to you guys a lot about authenticity and really just operating and taking it as it comes. And so she has not yet been able to join today. So we are going to move forward and proceed with the episode. Again, Dan is phenomenal, and I am so excited to have him here with us today. Dan is going to be talking to us about the power of inclusive teams. I know you guys hear us talk about inclusivity a lot and really how the most diverse teams are the most powerful, but really wanted to bring him in today to emphasize some of that for us. So who is Dan Rice? He is the Associate Managing Director of AI Risk and Governance Leads at Global AI Risk and Governance Services, having previously designed and built the AI and emerging tech programs in governance at Walmart. So at Kroll, he's developing that risk and governance strategy for their clients, deployment of AI systems and tools, including really the measurement and monitoring of risk in the data and the models. He has deep regulatory compliance, legal, and AI expertise. He provides those expertise in records and information management, particularly focusing in on electronic data and governance used to build AI models. Outside of work, who is Dan? He is a father of 4. He is a husband, 2 of his children at U of A, 2 not yet in high school, 2 cats, 2 dogs, a fish, and a bearded dragon. I was piqued by the bearded dragon. That's awesome. And he loves anything outside. So welcome to the show, Dan. We are super excited to have you today.
Excited to be here, Tiffany. Thank you. And yes, to your point about we just roll with it. I think this is our 3rd try. And so thank you for being flexible. It's been a journey to get here, but I'm super excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
I would say where there's always the, like the stumbling blocks or the blockers, that typically ends up being some of the most powerful and impactful. So just super grateful to have you. I know I talked to you a little bit about like what this podcast is about and what we really focus on. And for us, it's really about authenticity. It's a place for people, men and women, to kind of be able to show up as their whole self and to actually come and listen to what it is that we're talking about without leaving feeling like crap, like, oh, I really am not good enough now that I've heard these people with all their, with everything that's so amazing. It's like, how do I really join an episode and really feel better about myself and take away some really good wisdom and knowledge to kind of move forward in whichever topic that we're speaking on. So knowing that authenticity is the theme for us, and it's really what we're focused on. Talk to me a little bit about what authenticity means to you.
Ultimately, we're all just people trying to figure this out. COVID was super empowering from a leadership perspective for me because it not only put everybody on the same 2x1 square and sort of leveled that playing field. I think it was a stark reminder that there is a life behind the screen. And so I've really tried to embrace that idea. When I think about authenticity, for me, it's really knowing who you are and then who you're not, right? Because we can't be everything to everyone all the time. And I think we need to get really comfortable with saying that's okay and authentically say, this is where I play and how I can help. And this is really where I don't have any idea what I'm doing and I need some help. And being able to articulate that in real time and in a safe and sort of trusted way. I think from there, it's embracing that sort of uniqueness and what you bring to whatever room you're in and whatever table you're sitting at, and knowing that you have a place there. And that place is different than the person sitting next to you and the person sitting across from you. And that's okay. To the topic or to what we just said, you don't have to be that person next to you. The power of a team is that you bring different things and the person next to you isn't you. Being sort of curious and aware about that position and where and how you fit in, and then stepping into that role and understanding that, with all of our imperfections, when we get it all right together, I think we can come together to do really cool things.
That was really good. There's some key things that you said that really stood out to me and that I really appreciated hearing from a different perspective, because I know there are some themes and topics we're all passionate about, so we talk about a lot, but operating in what you're good at, like knowing what it is that you're really good at. We're not good at everything. And when we start trying to be really good at everything, we feel defeated because I think it's human nature, or maybe I don't know what society has taught us. We focus on the things that we're not good at. Like, how do I get better at that? Like, I want to be better at all the things that I'm not good at. And while it's great to develop and grow, I think there's some amazing power in really operating in what you're good at and finding a team of people that are really strong in the things that you're not, bringing that all together. So I really love to hear you say that. And then also just like not really comparing. I think that's something overall that I think humans, but especially as women, we're constantly like, oh, she's really good at this, or he's really good at this, and I want to be really good at this, instead of kind of really embracing and again, learning who we are, what it is we're good at, and trying to operate in that. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we talked about all your amazing background and your experience, really a lot in security and compliance and AI, and you've got a broad spectrum of technology. But can you talk to us a little bit about what your entry path into technology looked like?
Sure. And let me be upfront and authentic in this answer. I am not a technician. I'm not a technologist. My entire career has been tech adjacent, is the way I might say it. I've always wanted to build things and help sort of drive to solutions and outcomes that are beneficial for whoever we're working for or towards. I have never had the technical skills to bring those things to life. And when I think of analogies in maybe other professional spaces, I think of, the technology that you and I are speaking about today. I think about professionals that build things, and whether they be bridges or airplanes or treatments, houses, whatever they are, there are core people who do those things really well. But again, they don't do it alone. And nearly all of those professions, and I think tech is one where I have found a place, need a support structure around it. So how do I help in guiding the design of technology so that it is useful, so that it is beneficial, so that frankly it's legal and compliant? Although that's really dry and boring, it's important. And in the same way that maybe designers and builders and engineers of bridges need a support structure to say it's safe and that it complies with code and that it's going to be, an okay bridge for people to traverse across. I like to think of my adjacency to technology in the same way. I came out of law school and went into litigation, and that was adversarial by nature, and that's not my nature. I would rather design and build things collectively rather than fight every day. And I think when I got into sort of my second legal position, it introduced me full force to technology, which is where I really found that magic of watching people build things and solutions to problems that I've carried really for the past 18 or 20 years.
Yeah, I loved that you talked about how really the support is necessary and what that like adjacent to tech looks like and how it's really a support mechanism. I would say that there's something that we kind of have talked about on several episodes and really just in conversation overall, and it's how we have previously defined tech and what technology or technology roles are. I think we've been through so many years of you're either an engineer, a data scientist, right? You have these particular titles in a subset of a company, and those roles are technology roles. And the rest of us are not really tech, right? We are some other thing. And I feel like I'd like to know your opinion on this. I feel like as we continuously move forward in technology at the speed with which we're moving, which is extremely fast, I feel like tech is now touching most everything. And so I feel like when we start in the future, or even now, as we start defining who is in tech and what does that mean, I feel like that definition is going to shift and change. It's really going to be anyone that is touching technology, anyone that really understands. So even in a support mechanism, you have to understand the technology that they're building. You have to be able to have that conversation with business stakeholders or with our technologists, right? You have to be able to have that conversation and speak both languages in a way that they understand. And the reason I'm like asking you this is that I think as women, there's a lot of women that say, oh, I'm not in tech or I could never do that. And I think it's because of the way we've defined tech and we've kind of made it this like scary, too big to accomplish monster. And so I'd like to know your thoughts and perspectives on that.
Sure. Tiffany, I think you're exactly right. And I think we're moving to a place where we're not talking about departments, but the way at least I think of them, especially in organizations, which is how we tend to think about these problems, in ecosystems. And I think that's a useful analogy because they are so codependent, right? The technologists can't go do their jobs without people like me. And I don't have a job without technologists, right? And the customers don't get whatever problem that we are trying to solve on their behalf. We don't get that right unless the ecosystem all works together. And I think just like an ecosystem, we're coming to a point where the lines are blurring in a healthy way. And much like ecosystems, when you start to take component pieces out of them, they fall apart. And so that's really what I like to think about when we think about tech adjacency, or I'm not a technician, so I don't have any business in that space. I just think that's now the wrong frame to think through, because you're exactly right, Tiffany. There's almost nothing anymore that doesn't rely on this kind of technology, and it's not backroom big computer technology. It's in everyone's hands. It's at their fingertips, and we're making decisions on it that impact people, and we need to be aware of that in a sort of three-dimensional way.
Yeah, I just think it's really important because I think when we start talking about a lot of what we're passionate about, again, authenticity, but how do we really focus on increasing that 28% of women in technology? And I think a lot of that is going to come from really redefining. It's not making it something it's not, but I think it's expanding and enhancing what is technology and why everyone has a seat there, and that it's important. It doesn't matter what the title of your role is. I think that's just a really important thing. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. So as we talk about women and women coming into technology, I would say there really are some topics that are sometimes a little bit difficult to deal with, but they're real, right? And gender bias is one of them. And I'd like to know, as a male leader, you've been in the industry for a while, what challenges have you really witnessed women encounter, and kind of how have you been part of helping them navigate through?
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, Women in Technology of Northwest Arkansas and Gumption at my-gumption.com, for their support. Their contributions are critical in bringing these meaningful conversations to you. Stick around for more engaging discussions right after this break.
Thank you, Tiffany, for the opportunity to answer that question. Just like we talked about a little bit off camera, I don't pretend to share these experiences. They are very unique to an experience that I'll never walk, but to the degree I can be helpful, or at least offer a different perspective, maybe from an ally, I'll give it a try. In my experience, a few of the many and layered challenges. One is, by virtue of how organizations are designed and their history, there's a ton of work that oftentimes gets done by female colleagues who are more junior in the organization. And by virtue of how leadership happens and how reporting structures happen, it gets funneled up and up and up. And as the work gets funneled up, it becomes more anonymous. And I think as leaders of teams, it is really incumbent upon us to understand that that is happening and to give voice to the teams that are actually doing the work. And that is vocally, that is by name, that is by written document. When you start to attribute work to people, you put their name on it. When you are reporting, it is never I did this, it is we did this, or this is reflective of the great work of, and then you say a name. That is practiced behavior, but I think it's vital to start to help overcome that challenge. Another one that I've encountered and sort of seen firsthand is, for lack of a better term, Tiffany, I call it a care tax. And that is, in my estimation, really, really good working teams, really inclusive teams, don't just do the work in front of them. They do the work of the team. And that is taking care of folks. That is having baby showers and birthday celebrations and out of work activities. For better or worse, that often tends to fall to female members of teams. I think of that as a tax in two ways. One is it's just extra work, but it's actually core work to a healthy and functioning team. And I don't think it should be exclusively the domain of the female members of the team, although sometimes it can be. And I think it's important on us to, even when we think about committees that are going to go do this, or a team of people that are going to go do that, that team in itself is inclusive and diverse, so that we start to break that down. Maybe another challenge is that, frankly, the one that maybe everybody talks about, and I think the science and the data backs it up, which is the confidence problem, right? When I have been a hiring manager over the past 12 to 15 years, there is an over-indexing of unqualified males sometimes and an under-indexing of well-qualified females. And I think the data and the science would tell you that it's sometimes women believe they have to be 90% qualified before they throw their hat in the ring, and men sit down about the 60%. I don't know whether we need to bring the men up or the men down or the women up, but either way, the number of times I've hired a female into a leadership role and the conversation will come and she'll say, I almost didn't apply because, and then fill in the blank. That has happened an order of magnitude of times more than when I've hired male colleagues into roles as well. And so making sure in positions of leadership, and certainly from an ally perspective, that we are encouraging and that we're breaking down some of the mystique around job descriptions and job application processes and trying to be transparent about that, I think is really important to help overcome some of those institutional challenges.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I would say you're spot on. And I try to call this out in as many audiences and rooms that I'm in. It's honestly, there are some pieces that we have to own as women. Again, it's not this like dynamic of men don't want us at the table or we're not invited or, there's some other really huge pieces to that dynamic. And a lot of it is a couple of things. Number one, we're super risk averse as women. And so we don't always want to just show up in places where we're the only one. No one wants to be the only one of anything. We also like over evaluate all of the risks that essentially it's like analysis paralysis, but it's like risk paralysis. And it keeps us, right? Because we're so afraid of the unknown or what if this happens or this could be a little risky that we don't take the chance, right? And then my favorite, but is one that is the most common is the last one that you talked about. And it's the fact that we make ourselves meet every single criteria on the application. Men will meet like you said, 40 to 60%, and then they apply. So we can't be mad that we didn't get the job if we didn't apply for the job. And so I think there's some very real things here, right? Of knowing when we talk about women in technology, knowing when we talk about bias, when we talk about gender bias, that some of that we have to own on our own. And some of that, I think the more we partner with allies and the more we start really creating these diverse and inclusive teams, I think we really both have some things we could learn from each other on each side, right? And so I really want to focus in on making sure that we understand that there is a larger dynamic more than just we're not welcome at the table. And I think that is essential. So thank you for sharing your viewpoint on that. The other thing that you really said I liked was you talked about the we, that kind of navigating some of that is instead of like putting your name on something or you presenting it, that you really focus in on when you do that. If you're the person that's actually presenting, talk about the team, talk about how we put it together. And I think that that's a way, even if you don't really have conscious bias, there is a lot of unconscious bias that happens too. And so I think you can help navigate and sway away from some of that by using those we statements. So I really enjoyed that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, you talked a little bit about how you kind of lead by example in those ways. How important do you think, we talk a lot about mentorship in the industry. I think we talk about sponsors a lot, but what value do you think that number one, having a mentor or a sponsor bring to your career path? And then number two, the value of even having a mentor or a sponsor that is not just the same gender, but that an ally possibly, like what do you think the benefits are to those?
Yes to all of that is the short answer, Tiffany. When I think about those people and we put people in buckets to sort of help us with this discussion, I think of it in three ways. And I think there are role models, I think there are mentors, and there are sponsors, and those are very different things. When I think about those three, it's important to understand what the relationship with that other person is, and then is that relationship visible? And when I think about a role model, that may be someone you are wholly disconnected with. They might not even be in your organization. They may be someone you see on LinkedIn or someone you see on the news. They have created a set of values and a way of doing things that you aspire to, and you may never know them. And I think that's okay to have role models that you look to for guidance in that high level way. I think when we take it down to mentorships and we think about, is that a relationship? Absolutely. And it's a super intimate and trusted relationship if you get the mentorship right, because you're talking about work and you're talking about personal life and you're talking about career goals and you're talking about personal goals. And that is in the truest sense a rich relationship with a mentor. I think it's also important to acknowledge that oftentimes mentorships aren't visible and maybe shouldn't be by design. The rest of your team probably shouldn't know who all of your mentors are. Your mentors' mentors shouldn't probably know who they mentee. And that's okay, because I think you need that insulation in order to create the trust where a mentor can give you really explicit, straight, honest feedback. And to your point about should those be, I think the more they don't look and sound like you, and the more as a mentor, your mentees don't look and sound like you, again, that is a better relationship as long as it's trusted. And then finally, Tiffany, you make a very important distinction, and that is how you move from mentorship to sponsorship. And sponsors, I think, check both boxes in that there is a relationship there and it's visible. The relationship is probably not as transparent, as trustworthy as a mentor, and that's okay by design, in my estimation, but it has to be visible. Your sponsor has to say your name in rooms you're not in. Your sponsor has to talk to you about people when they are at lunch and you're not there. And we talk about saying your name in rooms, and I think we all sort of gravitate to, oh, that's where the hiring decisions are made. I think that's true, but it is not the only place where your sponsor needs to say your name. It's at coffee, it's at lunch, it's at their mentor circles. It's the power of that sponsor's network that you need in addition to their voice. And so I think all of those roles are critical. And I think as our listeners sort of step into their professional and personal networks, it's really important to be able to name which of those three buckets any given person might fall into so you can manage the relationship accordingly.
I really love that. And I think you hit something that I didn't, because I kind of talked about male versus female from an ally's perspective. But you said you think that there's the most power in any mentorship relationship where they don't look like you, they don't talk like you, right? And so I think we focus a lot, obviously, around like gender a lot. But I think, what does that look like beyond just gender? Like, who is mentoring you? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are those sponsors? Who are those coaches? Who are the mentors, role models, right? Make sure that it's just not cookie cutter people that look and act and think exactly like you. Or like, how do you even grow then? Like, the point of a mentor is somebody that can offer a different perspective, a different set of expertise. And if everyone is all the same, running in the same circles, doing the same thing, then you're going to get offered maybe two different words or however that looks, right? But yeah. I think really, if you really want that growth and change, which typically if you're willing to invest your time, like none of us have time. So if I'm willing to invest my time in a relationship with you, both people need to get something out of it. And I would say that's sometimes 4 and 2. I speak on mentorship a lot, but people think, oh, I'm going to get a lot from my mentor. Well, your mentor, it's a reciprocal relationship. They get as much as from you as you do for them. So really being intentional, I heard what you say, is really just kind of being intentional about those choices on who you're selecting. And it is a selection process. You're not just like, oh, Jane Doe is going to be my mentor because she's really cool or has a cool title, right? You need to be intentional about who you're selecting so you can both get the most out of what it is that you need from that relationship. And not only titles, like I think we search a lot after people with certain titles or things like that. But if you're not a good mesh, I always say, don't just ask someone to be your mentor. Before they even know that you're interested in them mentoring you, just go have coffee. Like, you'll know a lot in 30 minutes of like, does this person stand for the things that I would stand for beyond what's on my resume? Like, is this person willing to go advocate for people? Otherwise you end up in a mentorship relationship where you're not really getting anything out of it. And then it kind of ends up a really awkward or weird way of trying to navigate out. So yes. Okay, we are coming up towards the end of our episode, but there is one final question that we ask every single person. And I would say, if you had to leave our audience with one piece of advice, what would that be?
Never be the smartest person in the room. And if you are or think you are, then find a different room. I would really encourage everyone to be interested and be interesting. And by that, I mean, wherever you are, understand that you're in a place that has things going on and pay attention and be curious about it. You'll be a better person, a better professional if you are interested in what's going on around you. We're all so busy that the work in front of us will always be there, and it will be there for as long as we let it be. But if we don't pick up our head and see what's happening in our organization, in our community, in our world, you become a one-dimensional person in a way that won't accelerate your career, because the further up you go, I think when you talk about ascendancy in organizations, you really have to be 3-dimensional, and there's a context to that. And it's important to be interested in what's going on. the corollary to that is be interesting, right? And so when you get on a call early and someone says, how are you doing? Don't say fine and then go back to your email. Engage with them. Ask them how their day was. Even simple stuff like what was going on in the weekend, or it's okay to talk about yourself first and say, you'll never believe what I just read on fill in the blank, or I was listening to this really cool podcast and Tiffany was talking about this thing. Be interested, and people will then be interested in you. And that's how you grow networks and start to make real connections that can enrich nearly everything we're doing professionally and personally, in my estimation.
I heard relationships matter. That's what I heard. I heard you say that in a lot of really amazing words, but it's incredibly important, right? It's incredibly important to surround yourself with healthy people that are doing the things at some point that either you're doing or that you would like to do. And tasks never trump people. I have people say all the time, well, you're really busy. I didn't want to ask you if you could do this or mentor me. You're like, well, if you never know if you don't ask, the answer could be no, but what do you have to lose? The answer could be yes. And so thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your wisdom and your insight. We do not take that lightly. I am super grateful that you were able to spend the time with us. To our audience, as usual, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening and coming along this journey with us as we really just navigate what is authenticity and how do we show up in all of our careers as our whole self. If Jordan was here, she would say, please subscribe. And as usual, you will see Dan's information come across the screen at the end of the episode. So go follow him on LinkedIn. He's really doing some amazing things. I actually met him through a mutual connection, and we've had a couple of interactions on speaking engagements now. So go follow him. He's really doing some awesome things. And we will talk to you guys next time.
Well, that's a wrap. Another episode of Women in Tech Trailblazers podcast. Thanks for tuning in and sharing this time with us. If you liked what you heard, please share this episode with your friends in tech. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Your support helps us keep bringing in inspiring guests and uncovering topics that matter to you. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and making your mark in the tech world. Goodbye for now.